Hi there. In this video, I'm going to take you through just the basic fundamentals of assumptions and statements, questions which are asked in the reasoning section of the entrance exam. And I'll also just quickly run you through about 5 examples so that you understand what the theory was all about. In a later video, I'll try to run you through many more examples so that you get a firm grip on what is meant by an assumption. Fine? Okay, let us start. Now, I'm going to take you through an example and deconstruct the example to help you understand what is meant by an assumption, right? Let us say that I give you 2 statements, 2 facts, which you have to assume that they are true. My first statement is that I am in Ahmedabad. My second statement is that Ahmedabad is not Vadodara. Now, if I may ask, given that these are facts and they have to be taken to be true, what is the conclusion that you can draw from these statements? If you take your time and think about it, then I'm sure most of the students would be drawing pretty much the same conclusion. And that conclusion is that if I am in Ahmedabad and Ahmedabad is not Vadodara, then the conclusion is that I am not in Vadodara. Now, my question to you is, can this conclusion be drawn purely from the 2 given statements? If the only 2 facts that you need to take into account are that 1, I am in Ahmedabad, and 2, Ahmedabad is not Vadodara, then absent any other fact, can you always say that I am not in Vadodara? Or is it possible that there is some situation where you can say that the given conclusion is wrong? So, in short, do I need an assumption, a third fact, to be true for the drawn conclusion to be valid? Or if I'm in Ahmedabad and Ahmedabad is not Vadodara, then for sure I can only conclude that I'm not in Vadodara. Think about it. Now, many students find it that it's pretty obvious that if I'm in Ahmedabad and Ahmedabad is not Vadodara, then obviously I'm not in Vadodara. What else do I need to assume? But remember that assumption of obvious facts is what I'm looking at. So is there some obvious fact which is not stated here but which definitely needs to be true for this conclusion to be valid? Okay. Take a look at the assumption that I have made. Now, I'm assuming that I cannot be at 2 places at the same time. Now, you may say, that is obvious, that is pretty much true. But my dear friend, that's what an assumption is. It is an unstated fact which has to be true for the given conclusion to be true. Because if it is true that I cannot be at 2 places at the same time, then from the statements I can derive that I am not in Vadodara. But if my assumption is false, if it is possible for me to be at 2 places at the same time, that despite the fact that I am in Ahmedabad and Ahmedabad is not Vadodara, I cannot positively conclude that I am not in Vadodara. It may be possible that I am in Ahmedabad and Vadodara, 2 distinct places at the same time. So, for the given conclusion to be true, I have to assume that I cannot be at 2 places at the same time. So, there is something known as the 2-part test which I try to follow when trying to identify whether the given assumption is valid or not. First, I say, let the assumption be true, and I check, is the statement or the conclusion being derived true as well? If yes, then I move on to the second part where I assume that my assumption is false. Now, by changing the validity of the assumption, is the validity of my statement or conclusion changing? If yes, that means the statement is dependent on the assumption. By changing the truth value of the assumption, the truth value of the statement also changes, and hence that particular assumption is valid for the particular given statement or conclusion. So remember, the 2-part test and both the parts must be valid. That is, the assumption's truth leads to the truth value of the statement, and if the assumption is false, then the statement also becomes false. Now, let me quickly take you through a set of examples to understand how to go about such questions in the examination. The instructions for each of these questions is pretty much the same, and it is, in each question below is given a statement followed by two assumptions numbered 1 and 2. An assumption is something which is supposed or taken for granted. Now, you have to consider a statement and the following assumptions and then decide which of the assumptions is implicit in this statement. The answer key is mark A if only the first assumption is implicit, mark B if only the second assumption is implicit, mark C if either the first or the second assumption is implicit, mark D if neither 1 nor 2 is implicit, and mark E if both the first and the second assumptions are implicit. Now, option C, the either or, is a tricky one and many students get confused. To explain what is the meaning of an either or option, simply take this example. If I say I have only one child, I can have two assumptions. One, I can say I have a daughter, and second, I can say I have a son. Now, which of these two assumptions is to be taken as true? I can take either one of these assumptions as true, but I do not know which one exactly is true, and whichever I assume automatically disproves the other one. When I state that I have exactly one child, and if I say the assumption that I have a daughter is true, then the assumption that I have a son has to be false. But if I assume that I have a son is true, then the assumption that I have a daughter is false. So that is the kind of assumptions which are either or in nature. Fine. The first statement is, to get a first class in the examination, you have to work very hard. Now, first assumption is getting first class in the examination is desirable. Fine. If getting first class in the examination is desirable, then to get a first class in the exam, you have to work very hard. But if getting first class in the examination is not desirable, then would you work very hard to get a first class? Maybe not. So that is valid. Second one, if hard work results in success, then to get a first class, you have to work very hard. But if hard work does not result in success, then why do you have to work hard to get a first class? So both these assumptions are valid. Statement is, everybody loves reading adventure stories. First assumption, adventure stories are the only reading material. Now, it does not say, I need not assume that they are the only reading material. Even if they are the only reading material, everybody may love reading them. Even if other material are available, everybody might still love reading them. So by changing the value of the assumption, my statement does not change, and hence the first assumption is not required. Second is, nobody loves reading any other material. Now, I need not assume this because the statement does not say that everybody loves reading only adventure stories, right? So if nobody loves reading any other material, still the statement is true. If nobody loves reading any other material is false, even then the given statement still remains true. So neither one of the two assumptions is actually required. All the teachers are hereby instructed to reach the institution by 9 a.m. First assumption is, some of the teachers do not arrive at the institution in time. Now, just because teachers are not punctual may not be the reason for such an instruction. It's quite possible that teachers always arrive at the institution on time, but the general timing of the entire institution has changed. So even without this assumption, my statement can still stand. However, the second one, teachers will follow the strict warning given in the notice. Now here is a basic hint that I would like you to keep in mind. Whenever the statement is in the form of a notice, your default assumption is that people will read it and follow it. If it is advice, then the default assumption is people want it. If it is a threat, the default assumption is that the person is afraid of that threat. And if the statement is in the form of an advertisement, then the default assumption is that whatever is being advertised in the advertisement is something which the customer wants. So by this, the second is the only assumption which is true, and hence B for beta is the right option. The statement says, the next meeting of the governing board of the institute will be held after 1 year. First assumption, the institute will remain in function after 1 year. Has to be true. If the institute remains in function after 1 year, then the meeting can be called. If the institution does not remain in function after 1 year, then the next meeting cannot be called. So the first assumption is required. Second, the governing body will be dissolved after 1 year. The governing board will be dissolved after 1 year. Now, if the governing board is going to be dissolved after 1 year, why would I actually be holding a meeting? So this is contrary to what is given in the statement, and hence definitely cannot be my assumption. Only the first one is true, and hence option A. Statement says, if you want to study management, join Institute X. A's advice to B. First assumption is that B listens to A's advice. And if you remember the hint which I gave in question number 3, the default assumption for any advice is that the person listens to it. So first one by default has to be true. Second, Institute X provides good management education. Now, we assume that people generally give positive advice, good advice, and it's only if Institute X provides good management education that A will give such an advice to B. We do not assume ulterior motives or hidden motives, or that A has a hidden agenda or anything like that. We say that in an utopian world, if the institute is providing good management education, only then somebody would advise another person to study there. So the second assumption is also valid, and hence E for elephant. Both the assumptions are relevant. I hope you got the basic theory of assumptions. Remember the two-part test that I talked about. Check the validity of the assumption against the validity of the statement. If the assumption changes its truth value, so should the given statement or conclusion. Then and only then that assumption is valid for the given statements or conclusions. Wish you all the best. Have a good day.